the financial situation is the biggest threat to the world than anything else. And it goes back to the central bank, like you've been saying, and I've been saying this whole entire time. And with Khashoggi, Brennan and the rest, and this whole entire plan, I do believe, since, like you said, Trump came into office and all of a sudden the stock market's doing well. He used the manipulation that they've been using in the past. And now that you said that, this is why Mnuchin's there, this is why this person's there. Now, in my head, it's a little bit clear, like, he needed these people in there because they knew how to manipulate this, because they've been manipulating it for a very long time. So who better to use but the manipulators themselves to pump up this entire economy? And he needed the economy pumped up. This way, the deep state and everyone else that was against him couldn't say that you destroyed the economy. And I think you're right on with all of this. And I think this is why they were trying to push the Khashoggi, Saudi Arabia, because they were trying to figure out a way of maneuvering around of what he's doing to try to bring the whole thing down.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's why he has been also pointing at the real culprits.
Yes.
The Fed. Right. I mean, in my lifetime, Dave, and I'm an old guy. In my lifetime, I only remember two other presidents who pointed the finger at the Fed, and that was Reagan, but not as pointedly as Trump has, and John Kennedy, when he was talking about, the silver certificates and the like. And we all know what happened to Kennedy 55 years ago on that trip to Dallas. And it was that the sole reason why he was assassinated, because he was taking on potentially the Fed with what some of the things he was trying to do. I don't think it was the sole reason, but I do think it was a component. I think and I believe that what Trump is doing is he is pointing the finger so that he knows the system is going to go down, but he wants to make sure people realize who's really to blame. And he's been relentless on this, Dave. He has been relentless. I mean, there isn't a day that goes by where he is pointing at the Fed.
Do you think this is all being put out there, and he's continually pointing at the Fed to eventually open the Fed's books so people can see what they were really up to? Do you think that's the end game?
Yes, I do.
So you think
I think his ultimate end game is to end the Fed as we know it, that has been in place since 1913, since Jekyll Island. I believe that.
I think that's his whole entire plan.
And I believe his other objective is that as this comes down, to make sure that as few people as possible are in harm's way. So I want you to think of this. My dad was in the construction industry. And before he would start building big building, they would always tear another building down, right? That it was going to take its place, right?
Right.
And there was a lot of work. Everybody thinks they go in and they push a plunger and the building comes down, right? Well, but they don't see the months of work that went ahead in preparing that building for demolition. And as my dad used to say, the reason why, Dave, I know you want to see that building come falling down, but the reason why it's going to be 3 months before you see that happen is because we have to make sure that it's set up correctly so that when the building falls down, it falls down so there's as little damage to the other buildings around it and the area around it. And this is where the frustration is right now with many people. Many people are saying, not enough is happening. I don't see enough I don't see people in jumpsuits. I don't see bracelets, handcuffs on their wrists. I don't see progress. And I understand that. It's very frustrating for our listeners, for you, for me, for all of us. On the other hand, I think they're looking at this wrong. The powers that be, the globalist syndicate, have been in power for well over 100, 150 years. Some people say all the way back to before the Civil War. And they have set this very large building in place. And to expect a guy, not just one guy, but his team to set the charges, to take the building down in 2 years or 2.5 years or 3 years, I don't think it's possible. And I do believe, though, we are coming to a point where we have a window that's closing. And part of the window that's closing is, I believe, there's only so long they can keep this financial system from coming down. And also, we have a change in leadership coming in the House of Representatives. And I ultimately believe, in the long run, the change in leadership in the House of Representatives will play to Trump's and the freedom movements, will play into their hands in a positive way. Because if something doesn't get done, the finger can always be pointed at them, much like he's pointing the finger at the Fed. But I do believe that we have a part of a window that's closing that is very important, because, and it gets us into this, if you will, to the declassification of the FISA warrants of Carter Page, of the text messages between Comey and McCabe, and also the 302 forms, the FBI forms that are filled out when they interview somebody, a Bruce Orr, the number 4 person in the Justice Department in the Obama administration. Trump on September 17th of 2018 came out and said, I want these documents declassified, unredacted, released.
Right.
Here we are, months later, and that hasn't happened. And I believe that we have till the end of December, maybe the first week of January, that where a window is open. And by that I mean, I believe it's imperative that these documents be declassified and released, because when they are declassified and released, there will be people, understandably so, that say, wait, I want to see some documentation behind that. Well, as long as the Republicans have control of the investigatory bodies in the House, they easily can release this information. But once leadership transfers, if you expect Pelosi and Adam Schiff and Maxine Waters and Elijah Cummings and many of these other folks to release the information, that just won't happen. And I truly believe that the window closes, as I said, by the end of December or the first week of January. And if it doesn't happen, and two people I respect immensely that are whistleblowers with the NSA, legends, Bill Binney and Kirk Wybie. I spoke to them yesterday. They're actually going to be featured on my platform at davejanda.com in our Insider Insight show in the near future. They believe that this is a life and death situation for our country, the declassification. And they believe, and I agree with them, if this declassification doesn't occur, and if the people, the people I speak to, have spoken to, my sources, all felt that this was going to happen before the midterm election. And when Trump came out on September 17th and said, these need to be declassified, unredacted, let's go, it looked like that was going to happen. And I truly believe the midterms would have had a completely different tinge to them if that had happened. All the voter fraud in the world wouldn't have made a difference on the globalist side of the equation. That this, according to people I know and trust, and when I ran these names by Bill Binney and Kurt Wybie and said, look, when these documents are declassified, it's my understanding that certain individuals are going to be in huge trouble and be subject to significant litigation. Individuals such as former director of the CIA, John Brennan, under Obama, former director of national intelligence under Obama, James Clapper, James Comey, former director of the FBI under Obama, Loretta Lynch, former attorney general under Obama, Eric Holder under Obama, another previous attorney general, Rod Rosenstein, second in command at the FBI, and even Barack Obama himself, because there was significant interaction between the Justice Department, the FBI, and the West Wing of the White House when it came to this illegal surveillance of Trump, his team, and frankly, millions of other Americans. And they both agreed that all those individuals I just mentioned would be facing significant legal hurdles in order to maintain their freedom. And it comes down to something you and I have discussed before, and you've discussed on your platform, I have as well as mine, the rule of law. If you don't have the rule of law in place, you have a banana republic. You have an entity that can't be trusted. Its citizens can't trust it, and certainly no one internationally can trust it. And it's that critical that this declassification occur. And what bothers me is that there was a report out from the New York Post yesterday, and it was President Trump. And he said he hesitated to release the documents we just talked about because his lawyer, Emmett Flood, had advised him not to, instead recommending that he wait for a more politically advantageous opportunity. Quote, he didn't want me to do it yet because I can save it, end quote, Trump said. Quote, some things maybe the public shouldn't see because they're just so bad. Maybe it's better that the public not see what's been going on with this country, end quote. Now, you and I have discussed this, Dave, and part of that, I believe, is a psyops against the globalist syndicate. Trump's a brilliant guy. He's not stupid. And I believe he says some things to get in the heads of his enemies and try to make their heads explode. And he accomplishes that on a daily basis. And I'm just hoping that 90% of what I just said, which he said yesterday, I'm hoping that's what it was, that it was a psyops and it was meant to make his opponents, enemies, heads explode, and not what he's potentially not going to do when it comes to the declassification. Because without that declassification, and that declassification soon,